So Jesus' first official sermon, his first official sermon begins with these words. Seeing the crowds, Jesus went up the mountain. Jesus went up the mountain. The crowd was pressing, exhausting. Everybody needed something from Jesus. A healing, a touch, maybe a word of comfort, an answer to a question. Some just wanted to sit at Jesus' feet and just be quiet and listen. They just wanted to experience Jesus' spiritual energy. Jesus was exhausted. Kind of like I think Charity might be after that song. Or she's incredibly energized as I am. So Jesus walks a little bit further up the mountain. And now he's only with his intimate 12 disciples. And they sit. He sits. And I kind of imagine Jesus sits down really hard with that plop. He's exhausted. And then Jesus begins. He begins this way, and he says, "Blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek, and blessed are those who are hungry and thirsty, and blessed are the merciful, and blessed are the pure in heart, and blessed are the peacemakers, and blessed are those who are persecuted." Remember Monty Python's Life of Brian? What did Jesus say? I think he said, "Blessed are the cheesemakers." Can you say that, Susan? Blessed are the cheesemakers.
What's so special about the cheesemaker?
Thank you. So for the month of September, we're going to dig deep into the least 5 of the Beatitudes. These are life-changing, transforming, pithy little blesseds. I did a series a couple of years ago, as I mentioned here at First Church, but Susan's here now, so everything's a bit different, and I have so much more to say about each one of these Beatitudes. The Beatitudes offer incredibly profound insight into the core teachings of Jesus. They are not theology, thank God. They are not beliefs, but they are a way of life. Jesus' way of being. It's about our attitudes. They're so incredibly counterculture. I can't even begin to explain how these Beatitudes right now seem to be in such a clash with where the world is at, especially where America is at. If you want to know how to live and you want to know how to be like Jesus, here it is in these Beatitudes. So let's take a moment to prepare ourselves for the journey with Jesus. This is how I imagine Jesus sitting on top of the mount with his 12 intimate disciples. A guru, a teacher, a rabbi, a holy man, or a holy woman. Now, I would like you to focus on that image of Jesus for just a moment in silence. Put your hands in your lap, upward if you'd like, or downward if you'd like. You are now ready to receive from your teacher and your guide what he has to say just to you. Jesus is speaking directly to your heart, to your spirit, to your soul. Now move your hands to your soul, to your heart, to the center. Close your eyes. You are in the presence of a great teacher. Are we ready to receive Jesus' deepest, most profound teachings? We are seated, all of us, at the feet of the Master, part of a small, select group. Although not closed, it's very inclusive. And we are intently listening to every gentle, powerful word. In fact, we can even hear Jesus breathe in between his blesseds. Beloved teacher, we are ready to hear your words, to receive your guidance, to experience your love. I am quiet and relaxed, perfectly centered, perfectly balanced in the energy of my heart and my soul and the center of my being. I gently clear my mind of all distractions and preconceptions. I am open and receptive as the power of God awakens me to the very presence of God within me. Amen. Now open your eyes. Jesus says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Blessed are you when you've lost a loved one. I know, John, you recently lost your father. Joshua lost his grandfather. We've lost a great voice, although the voice cannot be silenced. And we've lost a great politician, although his words and actions will not be silenced. Blessed are you when you've experienced the loss of health. Blessed are you when you've actually lost your financial stability. Blessed are you when you've lost your home, when you've lost love. Blessed are you when you've lost even hope. I must catch my breath when Jesus begins his greatest sermon talking about the blessedness of loss. Losing Johnny almost a month ago. That is not how I would begin my first sermon or my first manifesto of peace, by talking about loss and mourning and grief. But it's the common experience of all of us as humans, is it not? It's the common experience of all of humanity. We will all experience loss and grief and mourning and sadness and pain at some point in our lifetime, if we have not already. And from a spiritual perspective, though grief and mourning and sadness and loss and pain, they are literally doorways into God's presence. They are doorways into God's presence. My daddy, Eddie James, a declared agnostic/atheist who fought in the Korean War, always said this to me. He said, "Jimmy Bob, they ain't no atheists in foxholes." During some of the greatest sorrows and disappointments of life, in the middle of war, there are no atheists, although I think there may be. But I did find this one great slide that I want to share, which I find somewhat humorous. Maybe if there were more atheists, there'd be fewer foxholes. Sad to say, an awful lot of Christians have started an awful lot of war throughout history. But if we're honest, most of the wars that have been fought have been religious wars in the name of God or Allah or Jehovah. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. I like Luke's version of the Beatitude because it changes it just a bit, and it said, "Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh." So I want to combine Matthew and Luke. And here's my version of the Beatitude. I want to say, beautiful are those who mourn and weep now, for you shall laugh. It's this juxtaposition, this yin and yang, this mourning and laughing. Many people I know in life are indeed suffering, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. but approximately 80% of the world lives in poverty. Most people go through life feeling like they've been run over by a truck. Jesus addresses these issues, though, head on. Jesus doesn't mince words. That's the very best thing about Jesus. He acknowledges and promises comfort, and indeed, according to Luke, potentially laughter. So, as I look at this beautiful beatitude, I have to ask myself, who were these people that Jesus was speaking to? Jesus was addressing a group of impoverished, marginalized men and women in an occupied desert land on the far remote outskirts of a brutal, lethal empire called Rome, where they had little voice and they had very little freedom. They were used to suffering under the oppressive Roman government, taxing them into poverty and suffering. Sound a bit familiar? Periodically, soldiers would pass through their villages, forcing the men to become soldiers. That's a current narrative. Raping the women and stealing their food and burning their homes. And even though this is not our current suffering in America, we as Americans still have it pretty good. We still are seeing loss of freedoms. We are seeing refugees and immigrants who now are being questioned even as to the authenticity of their birth certificates. Jesus is addressing the suffering, the extreme suffering that mothers and fathers and children are experiencing on our southern borders, because they're just coming to look for a better life. And yet now they're being separated and imprisoned. We've lost the myth of the American dream, I think, where everybody can be middle class and live in the burbs or a condo downtown if they just try hard enough. Jesus addresses the extreme suffering and loss that we've seen in our own lifetimes in El Salvador and Africa, Rwanda, Cambodia, Iraq, and Syria. Jesus addresses extreme suffering in communities of color as young men and women are being struck down because of the color of their skin, and women of the #MeToo movement in our misogynistic culture. But that's nothing new. This is an old, old story. Beautiful are those who mourn and weep now. Beautiful are those who mourn and weep now. Jesus puts us in touch in this beatitude for the hearers of the day and for us as contemporary hearers to the extreme challenges of our global humanity. Beautiful are those who deeply feel their loss and share compassion. You see, that's where Jesus is headed with this. These are the marching orders for the disciples. God, I think, is heartbroken by personal and global violence and grief. God shares the tears that we share, this lack of true humanity that we're seeing, this human selfishness which values nation and resources above human life. Psalm 34:18 is a beautiful reflection and says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." I could go on, and we could all be weeping by the end of the message. But it turns out, I think what Jesus is calling us to here is simply to step into that grief through universal compassion and solidarity. To step into the grief, personal grief, communal grief, global grief, through universal compassion and solidarity. Jesus wants us to comfort those who are grieving and know for ourselves then the consolation of God's Spirit. That God's Spirit is alive in us. That God's Spirit is poured out into each other through us, as the Weissel statement made clear. You see, we are brother and sister to the people sitting around us. We are all siblings with every other living human being in this space and outside this space. We are connected, and we are blessed to bless. We are blessed to bless. We are in this together. And the great mystery is this, at least for me, is that beautiful are those who mourn and weep now, for you will laugh. I don't quite understand this, except I enjoy laughter, and I think laughter is a gift. And strangely enough, I find much laughter in my pain. And I think if you don't know sorrow and mourning, how is it to know laughter and joy? We don't live in those either-or worlds. We know that we live in a world that is together in joy and pain. So in my closing words, I had a incredibly beautiful moment on Thursday of this week, Thursday morning. Amid all the loss of the week, the Queen of Soul and John McCain and Joshua's grandfather and John's dad and your beloved, I had an opportunity to rejoice with my friend Rabbi Shmuley. And I know I haven't shared much about Rabbi Shmuley lately, but he's been busy giving kidneys and other things and having babies. He's an amazing man. And so this was at his firstborn son's bris. You all know what a bris is? Oh, talk about suffering and mourning and pain. Oh. Now that's bittersweet, right? So I didn't really feel very comfortable taking pictures at a bris. So I snapped this picture quick of Rabbi Shmuley with two of his children. His quiver is full. And it was held at Congregation Beth Tilfala in Scottsdale at about 8:30 a.m. on Thursday morning. There were about 60 people there, and I was honored to be the only Christian clergy that was asked to share a few words in this incredibly Orthodox, modern Orthodox Jewish space. And as Shoshana and Rabbi Shmuley were watching their 5-day-old son being circumcised, the rabbi burst into tears. It was kind of an amazing moment, to be honest. And this is what he said. He said, "It is just so very hard to watch someone you love so very much suffering." I thought that was just so amazing and so beautiful to see this very large Jewish man bawling his eyes out at the bris of his firstborn son. This was a very holy and sacred moment. A child being brought into this ancient covenant with God, brought into an ancient covenant with God through pain, through suffering. And this baby had a set of lungs you would not believe. He's going to be a good Jewish rabbi, I said. It was full of pain, and it was full of joy, and there was beautiful music, and there was dancing, and there were tears. God knows our pain, and I finally realized that's what the sacred rite is all about. This beautiful ancient Hebrew rite is a symbol of both joy and a symbol of pain. Following the bris, I got to share this quote in the little gathering of folks that were eating afterwards. It was lodged in my head, and I shared this with Shoshana and the good rabbi. One of my favorite authors is Ann Voss Camp, and she says this. She says, "Joy and pain, they are but two arteries of the one heart that pumps through all those who don't numb themselves to really living." Wow. Joy and pain, they are but two arteries of the one heart. Put your hands on your heart. That pumps through all those who don't numb themselves to really living. You know, I've been numb to living at times. Have you? Or I've tried to be numb. I'm not sure I really could be, but I've made an attempt. I don't want to be numb. I want to be really alive in both the mourning and the celebrating, in the joy and in the pain, because life is way too short. Those of you who are young probably think you got lots of life ahead of you, but it catches up with you eventually. So beautiful are those who deeply feel their loss and share their compassion, who do not numb themselves out to life. And I know a lot of you in recovery here, you numbed yourself for a few years. And I want to close because I had no clue on how to close. And since I can't really explain how mourning becomes laughter and dancing and joy, I thought I'd close with this beautiful quote from Martin Luther King. It was written in the Birmingham jail when he was in the midst of a lot of suffering around the civil rights movement. It was actually in jail. And I added a little bit, I take some liberty. Beautiful are we who are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directory, that's a misspell, one directly affects all indirectly. I think that's this beatitude. You see, I think we need to have our hearts stretched during these next few weeks. We need elastic hearts, if you will. A heart to mourn, maybe what we sense we're losing in America or we're losing personally. But a heart to feel the pain of injustice and the pain of loss, to feel our own pain and to feel the pain of others around us. But to share that with each other, to not be numb, but to be real, to be authentic, to be our true God-given selves. You see, the path to enlightenment, every spiritual teacher will tell you, the path to enlightenment requires us to mourn. It's a part of the journey of movement toward as we mourn what has been. To recognize and honor grief as we move through it, because mourning leads from a sense of loss to acceptance. The acceptance that maybe God is really at work in us and through us, and opening us to new and exciting possibilities. So if you would turn to the prayer, I'm going to read through it once, and then I ask you to join me. Today, I recognize and I embrace a sense of grief and mourning in myself. I release old beliefs, behaviors, and priorities, and I open my heart to new spiritual possibilities. Thank you, Spirit, for the light and love that transform mourning into a profound sense of joy.